Hello everyone, my name is Bert and I'm here to facilitate this breakout room. Joining here, CEO of ArcNet Incorporated and Chair of Singapore Manufacturing Consortium, Mr. Willson Deng, and Development Scientist TCA star, Dr. Shanshan. So this part of the session is for our audiences to interact with our speakers, Willson and Shanshan, ask questions directly, and also have a more close-up view of what deploy a data-driven approach to sustainability initiatives. For our audience, please feel free to post any questions using the chat. If you have any technical issue, please post a private message to our next team. Willson, can you kick things off by setting the context for what ArcStone has been working on?
Sure, happy to. I think, based on what we talked about in the plenary, I think the data aspect of sustainability is a very key factor. I think if we're not able to measure the actual impact of what we're doing in the production process, not just for one factory, but the entire production line itself and the supply chain itself, it's really hard to understand, especially from the end consumer stage, of what is the right decision-making to purchase what type of product that's going to be the best for the earth versus something that's going to be much more worse, but cheaper. So ArcStone itself has looked at this and said, well, if data is being the most important one, ArcStone has had tools in the past that has been taking care of individual factories. That at least allows us to understand how much electricity is being used, how much wastewater may be put out, how much materials that we are scrapping, how much things that we have been reusing. These are things that we can capture inside of one factory. But what's more important then is to be able to scale that. So over the years, ArcStone's developed a tool set called ArcNet, which allows us to now connect the entire supply chain together. So as you can imagine, if I'm producing, for instance, shampoo, chances are the work that I do in my facility might just be the final steps, which is to mix the ingredients and fill the bottles. But in actuality, the bottles come from another supplier, the fragrances come from another supplier, and the raw materials come from another supplier. All these different suppliers may have a much different environmental impact on my final product than I would actually have in my own facility. So ArcNet was designed to string this out to as far back as we need, back all the way to the raw material that was used, which is maybe the iron that you're digging out of the ground to the oil that you're pumping out of the ground as well. That information would be captured so that we have an entire supply chain's worth of data for that final finished product that you produce, to get a measure of what really was the, not just the economic, but the sustainable metrics that we would be using to develop, to measure how these have gone into this particular product. So I think this naturally works very well because ArcStone has been working very closely with A-STAR and specifically with the ARTC. Dr. Shanshan here has been someone that we've been very close with to be able to utilize this information and utilize this data to come about something that actually is consumer friendly. Like, how do we get this information now into the hands of consumers so they can make a conscious decision to do better?
Thanks, Willson. Thanks so much for the introductions. I think what Willson just explained just perfectly addressed the challenge faced by the current LCA and sustainability analysis. So I'm coming from a very traditional life cycle environmental data scientist perspective. So since I started to working on these areas, one of the most challenges how we get the data and where are these data available and how do we assess the data, right? All the assessment framework methodologies is already there from the academic point of view, but how do we get the reliable data and more importantly, real-time data from the industry to support a very validated sustainability index analysis is something that has been a pain for the life cycle scientist. So I think collaborating with ArcStone will be a great opportunity for us to explore how do we merge the data-driven perspective with the sustainabilities and life cycle management together to bring to a more data-driven sustainability perspective.
Now, I do want to stress a little bit about how important this data aspect is and why a metric is so important in terms of driving sustainability is that one of the things I think, for those who are listening in that are from Singapore, and you may have this in other countries as well, is when you walk into a hawker center or you walk into a food store, you usually see a grade there, right? A, B, or C, or otherwise they're closed down already because of health issues. Those are very easy measures and metrics that allows an end consumer to make a conscious decision to say, do I want to eat here at this restaurant or not? And the same needs to get applied to products. And this is kind of where ArcStone's working with the ARTC and A-Star to drive towards, is that consumers need something just as easy as the ABC methods to rate a restaurant, to the consumer products and the things that we buy and use, so that we have a better understanding of, if I pick up one shampoo bottle and it's rated A, for example, I mean, I'm just using A, B, C as an example, right? It's rated A for environmental friendliness compared to another one that's rated B, and they're roughly the same cost. I would hope you would buy the one that says A, right? But even at the same time, as we get education going through, the hope is that if you see A, you might actually be willing to pay a little bit more to get A compared to B, because you know A had a better environmental footprint compared to B, which may have been much worse. And I think coming up with this metric is kind of where the fun and the struggle is. Because when you look at manufacturing sustainability, it's never about just one factory. It's never about just one location. It's so that we are so connected now. Parts and components come in from everywhere around the world just to build one product. So it's no longer going to be feasible for a company just to look at one facility and be able to calculate that. It requires the entire supply chain to be managed. And this is where, from ArcStone's perspective, we would be great in terms of having the tool sets to be able to collect all this information and stream it all together. But it takes a research agency and also government involvement in this case to really get behind the concept of internalizing, accepting, standardizing, and propagating the need for this metric to be shown. Because, you know, as you can imagine, the ABC ratings, it's not like restaurants really wanted to display it, they kind of had to display it. And I think we need to get into the policy of where, you know, if we wanted to talk about regulation, one of the things where regulation becomes very important is have that be transparent. I think with transparency and with something like the ABC rating that we can think about, that's what really will give the power to the consumer to make that conscious decision. And I think this is where I think the research agencies in Singapore have been fantastic in being able to not only work with organizations to help them with this calculation and formulate this in a way that is adaptable across different industries. But what's more important is that there is a pathway to get from a research topic and an idea out to a policy level where eventually when you walk into a grocery store to pick up your next bottle of shampoo, the hope is that you will be able to see these ratings and have that be a way to inform and advise on what's the best path for you to choose in terms of what product to buy.
Okay, if I may ask, also not talking about meat and the environmental impact of it, if I am a manufacturer itself, how am I going to start this journey or adopting the current solution that you guys have? Is it gonna be something that needs to be embedded in the current production process that I am currently doing?
So I think there's different flavors that you can start. And I think whenever we talk about data transparency, a lot of it actually is a solutions agnostic kind of situation. I think, and Dr. Shanshan, you can let me know as well in terms of what's the best path from the research side, is that typically when we start measuring, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go and buy equipment. You don't need to buy anything new. It's just having an active review of as simple as taking a look at your power meter every single day, recording it, even if you have to, just record it on a piece of paper, but ideally just record it into like Google Sheets, which is free, or in Excel, and take a measure of that and review it on a daily basis and see, is it going up or down, and why might it be causing it to go up or down? And then make informed decisions with the organization as a whole to say, well, on a particular down day, was it because we had less orders, or was it because we did something different that caused us to use less electricity? Because the sad thing about it is most people, when they look at sustainability, is that they only really look at it when the bill arrives at the door. Right? When your electric bill shows up, then you're saying, why am I paying such a high price? But in actuality, it's very, very in the right sustainable mindset to look at it on a daily basis. And if you're reviewing on a daily basis, you can find it.
Yes.
I see. But before we go and deep dive into the technicalities of it, Dr. Shanshan and Willson, we have some questions coming from the audience itself, from Thais de Castro Moraes. Hi, Dr. Yang Shanshan. I am a first PhD student, and my research interests are focused in data-driven approaches for inventory optimization. What do you believe are the current trends or research gaps regarding sustainability in inventory systems? Dr. Yan, would you mind answering that question?
Yes, I heard your question. So it was asking about how was data-driven sustainabilities that could impact on the inventory optimizations. Actually, that is a very good question. As currently what we're working with Willson is looking at how do we bring in the data-driven perspective into the whole supply chain. Like when we talk about supply chain, it's about demand, supply, inventory plannings, manufacturing, all the way reach to the customers, right? So how do you make a sustainable inventories management? That's depending on what is the optimizations of the inventory policies, when do you stock up, and what is the best amount of data of the storage you need to put it in the inventories. So this information is not a standalone decision to make. If we have this whole visibilities of data from different nodes of supply chains to be available, that can support you on this decision-making optimizations for the inventory management. That is how the sustainability could come in terms of reducing the expiry of the product. Like if you overstocking, that may lead to the overstocking of the goods, or if there's like product shortage, that could also lead to the unmet of the customer demand. Like, and look at the current situations where the COVID comes in, right? This inventories, how do we foresee the unpredictable stopping from any of the suppliers? How do you possibly restocking up, prepare for the unpredictable shortage event? So all that depending on will be alleviated. This challenge may be alleviated by the increased amount of data be available from different nodes of supply chain to enable a better inventory management.
One thing I would like to also add to that, the beauty of the research in the inventory side is actually there's a lot. If you look outside of a single factory level, and what I mean by that is imagine the efficiency gains, not just in sustainability, but also in cost. Is that if you were able to aggregate companies that or manufacturing facilities that are within a certain region that need to reorder for roughly the same products or from the same suppliers, could have done that in one shipment versus in 3 shipments to the 3 different companies. If you had just synchronized that particular optimization so that you're looking across all of this data, you're able to actually do these optimizations. So that's why it's so important that data has to be the first foundational layer before sustainability can really occur. Because all the tools that we are learning in school and actually when you're working through your PhD, that's where you need that data to be able to do that analysis. And that's just one example. The amount of things that you can do if you had true visibility across all the manufacturers within a certain region, and imagine if that data was alive, there's so much you can optimize in that particular case, down to the level of trying to even, at the extreme case, right? Figuring out what's the most optimal electricity spend, because if you know a lot of companies are going to be working on certain jobs at a certain time, you could actually decrease that your own jobs at a certain time so that there's no spike in electricity consumption, so that not only do your price go down, but actually it's a more environmentally friendly, because the power plants don't have to crank up as high as much, and they can sustain it at that level. So there's so much research that can be done, not just on an inventory level, but just on an overall data level, once you're able to collect all of that information.
Dr. Yang, are you saying something currently, or it's just, I think Dr. Yang right now is
I believe it's a
issues.
video lag, probably.
Yeah, I think there's some lagging on the video.
I just want to throw this question. Are these data-driven capabilities better suited to certain kinds of industries or business? I assume there is some base level of readiness, or even a scale of operations for a business to get the most out of it. Is it right? Is there any specific industry or business that we can implement this?
Well, I would say that there are certainly certain industries that would have a much more dramatic impact. So if you're an oil refinery, if you're a massive facility that's doing oil and gas related things, or if you're a high electricity consumption type of operations, or you have a natural issue with a certain type of compound that gets produced that is either wastage that needs to be managed, you will be impacted further. And there's unfortunately no way around it, right? So for instance, you can be very, very environmentally friendly, for instance, if you were in the apparel industry, and all you did was actually just the sewing process. So you have a lot of people, but maybe all of your sewing machines and all your processes that you're using is renewable energy. But then if you just look one step before that, which is the dyeing mechanisms to dye your cotton to be blue or pink or blue, that's a very, you know, intensive kind of environment that may need a much more extensive cleaning procedures. So yes, it will have larger impact for certain industries compared to others, but it does not mean that you should not all be connected into the same ecosystem. Because what will happen, what will impact everything is that the final product that gets made, we need the entire linkage from end to end. So everyone has a part to play, but certain people will have a larger responsibility compared to others.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Wilson's point. Just to add on, so definitely the solution we develop will be generic in the nature that it could be applicable to the all sort of like industries. But we do see some industry may take the first step in terms of implementing solutions. Like one of the reasons maybe regulations, such as the reason like implementation of the carbon tax. So those energy intensive companies real impact on their revenues, they may come into us first, say, hey, can I have your solutions to help me to monitor my energy spending to reduce at least my bill, right? That is a very impactful pain on their profit, on their industry profit. So those companies may make the first step, but eventually when the system and solutions getting more materialized and being well in the industries, so they will be followers that seeing the impact that actually is not only for the green, for the name, it's also the true benefit that they can see on the reduction of their electricity bills, on the like reduction even on their raw materials consumptions, right? So they see the true benefit, then they will be on board with us.
I see. We also have questions coming from Charles Zhao right now. Wilson, you mentioned about matrix and you pulled a Hawker Center as an example. Do we have a good and mature sustainability matrix to effectively measure the level of sustainability, or this is still a topic under exploration? This is based on the previous example that posted earlier.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question that you have just asked, and this is kind of actually why both ArcStone and the ARTC and A-Star is actually here, is that we are actually doing this. We are in the process of actually developing and coordinating a live real-time metric of the individual products that are being produced with a rating system, just as the one that I was talking to you about from A, B, C to D, or whatever you want to say, but specifically tied so that it is not only incorporating the entire supply chain, but it's also putting it within relationship to other product offerings that are available in the market, right? So the idea is that you're looking at it as in a comparison against all the other products within the same product line. So when you go out to buy shampoo, there's probably going to be a default baseline of how much pollution that was taken to produce that. But what you want to be able to do is benchmark that against what was better and which was worse in kind of the overall kind of options that you have taken. So this is something that is actually being undergoing in development, and I'm with Dr. Shanshan has been leading this together with ArcStone, and we're quite proud to be able to work on this together. And this is where I think in the next year or so, you will start seeing much more information about it in the press. Also tied into the government kind of policies as well, so that it becomes more of a standard thing for people to be aware of, and also for end consumers who may not have been as, you know, environmentally conscious of this particular situation, now seeing this on a day-to-day basis, so that it becomes an embedded and almost a subconscious decision-making process of saying, I want to be more environmentally friendly because I see the rating, and hopefully this rating will incentivize me to do and purchase the better thing for the environment compared to something that isn't.
So meaning the current technology that you guys are promoting, which is ArcNet, is something ongoing as a project, or is it currently available in the market?
So ArcNet, the toolset, is actually available in the market to start using. This will allow you to track not only for your production operations and your supply chain operations, but allows you to take and measure all of these particular environmental and sustainability conditions and metrics that you need to measure along the line. But the final metric that will go on the shampoo bottle or the product that you buy, this is what ArcStone and A-Star and ARTC is working on together. That will come out in about a year or so's time, so that you'll be able to start seeing that not only as becoming more hopefully as a norm, but then actually being able to slowly start seeing it. And our hope is to be able to start seeing it in the stores when you go in, and you'll be able to measure and say, pick up a bottle of shampoo and see the actual rating on the back. And that's when we start to see our dream being realized of sustainability of the manufacturing process now finally completing the circle of going into the actual consumer, so that the whole network is tied together with the transparency necessary for consumers to be able to make the right decision.
I see. We do have a question being posted by Jamie. Hi both. Do you foresee that the pursuit of environmental sustainability can drive business properly? If yes, why and how?
Sorry, drive business profitability?
Okay, let me just repeat the question. Okay, let me just repeat the question. Do you foresee that the pursuit of environment sustainability can drive prosperity? If yes, why and how?
Dr. Shanshan, you want to take first, or shall I go?
Yes, I can. Maybe I can provide some interesting market trend. Like one is the number one observing effect is from the carbon tax, which I just shared with you. So there will be real monetary impact on the profit that a company will gain. Let me take more concrete examples. See why the current internal combustion engines are phasing out gradually and moving to electrifications. That is mainly driven by the reduction of the carbons, right? So if like the car manufacturer, they don't make this transition, like on average, more than 70%, 70% of the revenues will be eaten by the carbon tax. So that is the real benefit. That's a real benefit of them to switching their business pattern into a more sustainable, driven consumer patterns. So this is one example that sustainability will come into a real impact that will drive the business to change on the patterns they operating their system, on the pattern they strategize for futures. Yeah, Willson,
so one thing I do want to add to that, yeah. Thank you. One thing I want to add to that actually is that when you talk about prosperity with regards to using and focusing on sustainability, it's not as easy as just one single thing that the company itself can just focus on and assume that it will work. It's a combination of education of the consumer and also a combination of government regulations. Now, what we see here is that the trend, as we were discussing originally in the plenary, was that millennials and the new generation that is focused on sustainability is growing. And there's no denying that. And because we see the impact of what we're doing to the environment, and it's causing issues for the next generation and the next generation after that. So given that we know around the world there is an increase in the sustainability consciousness of this problem, we know that consumers will slowly move towards that direction to try to look at products that are more sustainable and will buy things that are more sustainable, even if it's more expensive. And as we see in government regulations, we've seen even in Europe, the higher regulations that are coming in for sustainable products to be imported. We've seen changes even within China where they are implementing a huge amount of sustainability requirements that are put in. And we see this glowing around the world. It may have ebbs and flows due to government administrations, et cetera, but the general trend, as we can see globally speaking, is on a trajectory of upwards of focus on that. Now, what we hope to be able to see here is that companies catch up. The problem right now is companies are not catching up. So overall, the amount of things that we're polluting is not improving at a rate fast enough that we really need to. But if we're looking at the profitability and the ability to be prosperous of this process, it will take time. And what you'll need to do is to be able to lobby all sides, meaning getting education in place, getting the government bodies to move in that direction, and also making sure that your own company is ready to move in that direction as well. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. So I don't think it's a matter of, will it come or will it be profitable to be sustainable? It certainly is, because by default, being sustainable sometimes is just being smart, right? Less electricity you use, the more money you save. So why are we even having this conversation between having a if or else, right? But it's actually a dual thing. But in terms of true profitability, that will require a much more concentrated effort. And we see this happening in governments already, because again, most governments realize, I think, that it's just not sustainable. There are a lot of things that may be preventing them from moving in that direction to start imposing regulations, but we know that it's just a matter of time before they come. So getting into that stage, getting in and getting ready is a very good early advantage that you can leverage right now. So yes, I do feel quite strongly that profitability and having the ability to proliferate these solutions and tools is going to be very impactful for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I could just
So
add
based
on
on
to
what,
what Wilson explained.
okay, yes,
It is
Shanshan, please.
also, yeah, it is also about changing of the mindset about how do we do the life cycle management. If really we're seeing the opportunity coming from remanufacturing, right? How people perceive it is like it is secondary product, but actually remanufacturing provide opportunities of bringing the product back to good as new conditions. So with that manufacturing process, we can actually save up to 80% of the raw materials and 70% of the CO2 emissions. So this actually is contradict with what we're thinking before, but at remanufacturing itself does face the challenge because at the product design stage, the designer doesn't consider about those challenges we face at remanufacturing. So that to some extent reduce the possibilities of potential product being reused for longer time. So if all this data and challenge could be feedback via our data-driven approach back to the product designers, then from right beginning, we do it right and we're designing for the longer life cycle. So that could change the whole business operations as well.
I see. Talking about mind setting and adopting it in the current landscape that most of manufacturers has, do you think that our staff needs to undergo any type of training or business operations to let them have this kind of skill setting in terms of adopting the process? Do they have to undergo any such training on this?
I think the training process is, again, when we were talking about it in the plenary, I think the educational process needs to actually start very, very early from when you've entered kindergarten. Exactly. And you start having that as an innate need to ensure that we don't take the shortcuts, right? To avoid taking as many shortcuts when it comes to sustainability. Because it is a zero-sum game, because there's only so much available resources, and there's always a struggle for it. But being able to go through and make the right decision is an important thing. But what's very interesting about why we're having this conversation within ITAP and about Industry 4.0 is that technology plays a massive factor in being able to take those shortcuts but still benefit both sides. Right? Energy efficient solutions to be able to deploy is actually a shortcut, if you can imagine, right? Originally, I was burning kind of different types of light bulbs that actually use a lot of electricity, but then the reason why is because I need my facility to run 24/7. Now I change it all to LED. Yeah. Thanks to technology, I can still run 24/7, but now my bill drops, right? It's an investment, but it's a win-win on all sides to be able to use this. So when it comes to teaching or training, I think each industry will have their own areas of lectures or coursework or sustainability tools or options that are available. And I do feel that it's very important that manufacturers and business owners and production managers and factory managers actually get involved in these types of events to learn about what is within their industry, energy efficient or sustainability improvement projects that have worked that has been not only a win-win, but then you see a good return in terms of investment as well. Or it was seen as an investment towards a potential competitive advantage. And I think that was highlighted during our previous talk as well. And those are the things where if you are just in a bubble in your own factory all the time and you just sit there trying to think by yourself, you're probably not going to come up with a solution. But if you open yourself up to events like this within ITAP and learn and listen, yes, that's the best, I feel, the best type of training that you need to get through. You don't have to sit through a classroom, although if you can, please, because there's going to be a lot more that you can learn in a classroom as well. But obviously, a lot of the management teams are not going to have the time to be able to do that. But if you step into an ITAP Academy session or something like that, that gives you the end-to-end very quickly, so that then you can have your team go dig into the specifics that might be most relevant to you, that's going to be very, very important. So that learning process should be always a constant thing, because we know with Industry 4.0, it's not about a single solution that solves it all. It's about new solutions coming out every day. And to be on top of this, you need to be involved in events like this to get the information in and to learn.
Yeah, I agree with Wilson's point. This training is like sometimes even you send the staff for training, right? They were forced to study, so they may not be mentally really focused. So sustainability should be immersed into their daily activities. It could be a reminder putting next to the machine, like if the machine doesn't need to be put on run, then put it in the sleeping mode, or even shut down the machine. So it could be really implemented and granulated into the very detailed level of operations. And I've also believe this training is not only important for the adults, right? I see there's also a growing trend of training our young generations, even starting from the primary school, right? They learn how to do the sustainability project. I think that shows the promise of how our younger generations will be growing and eventually make an impact.
That is true, and I agree with what both of you guys has mentioned. Also, it really just a matter of living with a concept of sustainability first and believing on the value proposition of it. We have another question from Jamie right now. What are your views on the state and future of sustainability for the food industry? Both of you can answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, food and beverage itself is, from a sustainability standpoint, is very important, because if you look at not just the manufacturing process, but also in the sustainability of how that food originally came from the original source, the farms and the processing and everything not only has a direct impact on human health, and we've seen how that can be disastrously done if there are quality issues, if there are kind of shortcuts that are done in the production process or in the farming process itself as well. That ends up being a terrible thing at the end of the day for the food and beverage folks, because we're ingesting this, right? We need that to fuel ourselves, and if it's something bad, it will have some sort of health consequences at some point in time, not just for us personally, but also for the environment. So I think if you look at that aspect of the amount of, for instance, farmland that we're using, the amount of meat that we may be consuming as the globe continues to expand, that is a significant issue. Finding more sustainable solutions that are not only perhaps closer to home, where you cut down on some of the logistics of the transport necessary for a lot of the foodstuffs and the raw materials for the food and beverage industry, but also sustainability in terms of longer shelf life. This is where technology comes into play as well. Where, for example, if you had mechanisms or solutions that could extend the shelf life of fruit and vegetables that may have been fresh, but does not hopefully have a bad impact on human health, that provides tremendous amount of gain, not only through the entire supply chain, but also for the sustainability metrics that we're talking about here, because you're no longer throwing out so much wastage that could have been consumed, but because we didn't have the technology or the mechanisms to be able to preserve it for longer, that becomes an issue. So I think food and beverage and sustainability actually goes very well hand in hand. And that is perhaps one of the closest industries that have an immediate impact on people, because you can't hide it, right? Because once it's being consumed, it's an immediate impact on everybody. So I think that one has a very close-knit relationship. And I'm glad that someone has brought this up. And I think is that there still needs to be a lot more work in this space. There's so much that needs to be done throughout that supply chain, not just at the factory level, but all the way down to the original farming level, needs to be looked at and to see how we can improve it. And this is where I think a lot of research is available and a lot of opportunities for innovation. There's so much there in that entire food chain that we have not really improved in the many years. Industrialization had made it very easy in terms of mass producing it, but mass producing it doesn't mean that it was healthier for us as humans. So, and that's from an actual health consideration. So this is something where I think it's a very powerful field, very open field, and a lot of opportunity. So for manufacturers that are in the F&B industry now, start opening up your eyes in terms of seeing what solutions are available out there. Because the more that we can innovate on this area, the more it is and the better it is for everyone. And it's the same in terms of the profit margins and the lines that you are able to bring in. Because the longer the food stays fresh, the healthier it is for people. The long-term benefits of that capabilities within your organization will, in return, generate profits. And that's where you want to focus into.
I see. Dr. Shanshan, any last words to answer that question?
Yes, I think Willson gives a very nice holistic pictures about how sustainability will impact the whole food supply chain. Maybe I can just add in a few interesting directions from my past experience. One of the areas that food can be more sustainable is like look at the package, right? We buy food, but all the food come up is the packaging. So what we do with those packaging, right, is usually we dispose them. Then the packaging materials are like plastic materials. Usually those are not environmental friendly. So they are ongoing hot research look at how do we design the packaging sustainable materials so that those packaging are as like a biodegradable, that to the sense that it wouldn't bring any impact to the environment to the minimum as possible. Then other interesting areas look at how do we recycle those bottling, right? Like those milk bottles, those beer bottles, right? For currently what Singapore do, right, is like we dispose them, but is there a proper way of recycling them by proper cleaning, then re-inject them into the manufacturing stage? I know Heineken is doing a good job. They have been designing the supply chain in a way that they were able to recycle those bottles. So instead of like putting them into the waste. Then another interesting area is ongoing is look at the food waste. How do we turn those food waste like into energies, right? How do they like turn them into energy to fuel into the grid systems? That is another interesting areas ongoing for the food supply chains.
Shanshan, we are coming to an end, and I think we need to close this session. Okay, for our audience, if you see questions that you want to post, you can either go to Interchange platform where you can post all your questions there. Both of you, Dr. Shanshan and Willson, thank you so much for your time then. And we need to say goodbye and see you and hope to see you guys again on the next round of our webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone, take care.